Okay, so we're gonna get started. So welcome everyone to the April Brigade Project Standup. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that we're abiding by the Code for America, Code of Conduct that I'm gonna share here. Oops, I'm gonna share it to everyone. Just a second. So I just shared it in the chat and just reminding everyone to be respectful, listen as much as you speak, and assume best intentions. This session is being recorded. I might switch to everyone being panelists because we're kind of a small group right now. In that case, I will remind you that we are being recorded, and if you don't want to be recorded, please turn off your video. Okay, so we are going to start with our first speaker, Dan.
All right.
Yeah, you can introduce yourself, I guess.
Sure.
All right, yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Carmody. I come from the Code for SF Brigade. And the project I'm going to be presenting tonight, and I can start screen share, is, I guess, titled Police Trends. It's all about exploring and looking at trends in police spending, mostly police budgets. This was a project that emerged out of conversations last summer around police spending. And in those discussions, one of the things we realized was that, well, we didn't really have a good idea of how much was spent on police or city budgets in general. And that in order to have a good conversation, kind of one of the starting points is to have some knowledge of what the breakdown of a city budget, how much of a city's budget goes into their police, how has it changed and evolved over time, and are there ways we can tell whether it's effective, whether that spending makes sense. And this is the project that emerged. I'll walk through the page that we have. This is currently live at policetrends.org. It is an active project, so if you go there and explore it, I'm sure you'll find little UI issues and all that. If feel free, as if you take time to go look at this, definitely send commentary to me, DM on the brigade Slack, however you want. Now, and maybe to start off, the goal of this project was not necessarily to kind of advocate for a particular solution, but mostly trying to get the data, present it in a way that makes sense and is intuitive and lowers the barriers to people understanding their city's budget, understanding police spending, and offers up ways to get involved and be active. That was our intention. So the page kind of has, or like the project has two main sections to it. The part that kind of where we started early on, trying to understand a city's budget in general and how police fits into that. So first of all, I guess the homepage here has a drop down with two cities in it. Our expansionary plans are to make this modular and allow for other cities to add in their information. Hopefully we can make this in a way where, with the data in the right format, right, budget data, police data, we could plug it in and get the same kind of presentation. Right now we have San Francisco and Oakland, so I'll pick San Francisco. We have a balanced budget section. This is a place sort of where we started, where in this you can essentially, and actually let me reset. So in this, we have the city's budget broken down into, I think it's about 7 different high-level categories. We have, starting with community health, we give a description of what departments fall under this high-level category, and where those funds go to. And then you can toggle this and set how much you might decide to put into that budget category. Move on to the next one. So we have culture and recreation. Again, you can kind of set this value. You can see what culture and recreation actually goes to, what Academy of Science, Arts Commission, various museums and libraries. You can work your way through this, and then or skip to the overview. In the overview, you can see these 7 categories and still set these little dials here about how much you might choose to put into these categories. Little tool tips, so you know, public protection, for instance, is the one where we have sheriff, police, fire department. And then in the end, compare to actual budget, where you can then see this is how much in red the city of San Francisco. San Francisco is a little unique. It's both city and county, but how much San Francisco puts into these different categories and how your assessment might compare. Our goal with creating this balanced budget tool was to hopefully get people to start to think about the categories the city is spending money on and how much money goes into each of these different categories, to try to get a sense of the scale involved, the numbers that we're talking about, and also to see how a city's values, in a sense, are kind of represented in this budgetary breakdown. And that's this tool, kind of one that we first started with. And then we have this project was driven by the data science group at Code for SF. And so one of our intentions was to do data analysis and data visualization, which we represent in this Explore Trends page. And here, again, we have drop downs, so you can switch between San Francisco and Oakland. And here, this is where we kind of present some, again, high level stats, some trends, some analysis in general for both cities. And I'll go through both of them real quickly. We can see the average total budget over the last, in the case of San Francisco, that's the data set that we found to work with. So $8.7 billion on average over the last 20 years, with an average spent on police of about 400 million. We have, again, a section on budget overview and a little map here, a tree map, in which you can see we've broken down into these 7 different categories. Public protection is the one that police is in, so we can zip in here and see what percentage, both, if I go back, how much of the city's budget goes into public protection and how much of public protection budget goes into the police. And even go into the police and see, well, more than 50% of that goes into patrol. Go down further, we have some graphs about trends, how the amount that SF has been spending on police over time, over the last, about 20 years. And again, this data set that we had here went up to 2017. We can certainly supplement it. And then the third section that we have for both San Francisco and Oakland is whatever stats we're able to find from police use of force. In this case, SF provided stats based off of the type of force, like firearm, physical control, strike, and then trends over the last couple of years, and then also a racial breakdown. And we try to pull some stats out of that to present and highlight. And then our a concluding paragraph where we sum up, and essentially both for San Francisco and Oakland. Well, before I get to that, I'll quickly scroll through Oakland. And again, this is one of the areas where we are open to expanding, collaborating to get other cities involved and get their data in here. Hopefully, again, making this sort of plug and play. Oakland, we have their annual budget, their annual police spending. I believe, police department would be right here for the total city budget. We have some comparative other departments and highlight some numbers that they're spending on, say, Department of Violence Prevention. There's a lot of the analysis that's very specific to cities, depending on what data you find and what you have access to and how they handle their budget. We again have similar trends. It's a different set of years as compared to San Francisco because we're working with different data. And then we also have some population breakdowns, both within the police department staff versus Oakland population. And again, Oakland has kind of some different stats available on use of force. In this case, we have stats relating to different levels of force. Level 1 being something kind of more serious, for instance, including any use of force resulting in death. Level 4 being the least serious, including intentional pointing of a firearm. We display these trends. And again, we highlight some some stats on the use of force broken down by race or ethnicity, and again, highlight some of those high level numbers. And in general, our conclusions kind of for both San Francisco and Oakland, what we present in this final paragraph, is something to the effect of spending on police has definitely risen over the last whatever number of years we're looking at for either one of these cities. The use of force statistics that we have show a trend in the right direction, meaning like less use of force. Within those use of force statistics, the Black population is overrepresented compared to their representation in the overall population. These are the stats, these are the numbers we're presenting, and then each one of these things we try to include a little bit about what's happening with the new budget, what's the direction the city is trying to take, and then this call to action where we currently are giving information about how to find your local representative, how to attend public meetings, when are upcoming elections. And these are the stats, or these are the calls to action that we have, and we're trying to facilitate reaching out to the appropriate people. All of the data sources that we have are also highlighted down here, and I think even on the, I believe on the, yeah, on this page, the home page as well. So that's our project in a nutshell. Excited for people to go, again, policetrends.org, go use it, figure out issues with it and let us know. And also, you know, if you're interested in collaborating, trying to figure out how to make this modular and expand to other cities. Hopefully it's just a matter of getting the data in the right format, plugging in, and we get the same kind of presentation, same kind of story. But that's what we're aiming for.
This is awesome. I have questions, but I'm going to first see if other people have questions. I am going to just make everyone panelists. I don't know if I can do that like all at once, or do I have to? Let me see. This is my first webinar hosting, so I'm still kind of getting familiar. Oh,
yeah, nice. Patrick had a comment about the comparative focus that we have over time and place. And I think that's so much of what we were aiming for was just realizing that these numbers we're talking about need context, whether that context is comparing over time or that context is comparing to other line items in the city budget or other places.
So I'm promoting everyone to become panelists. So I'm just reminding everyone that you are being recorded. So if you prefer to not, then please turn your video off. So now everyone should be able to unmute and ask their question if they would like.
I have a question. I don't mind going first. Do you anticipate that police data is fairly similar in most cities? Is there kind of a standard reporting format you think you'll be able to access? I feel like that's kind of, we're all realizing how very little police data exists, and I'm wondering like how uniform the reporting might be. Yeah,
excellent. That's a good question. I mean, so much of this depends on what data is available. Exactly. Structuring it around budget, in general, you can find budgetary information, whether or not it's easy to get into the right format or not. I mean, generally you can find it. And so the budget trends, the budget breakdown should be doable. One of the things that isn't always possible is how granular can you get? So for instance, like Oakland, here we just have police department. There's nothing within it. If I go to San Francisco and look, well, here we can get within police department, we see patrol, airport police, investigations, crime control, and other bits. That's not always available. The budget trends, these seem to be things we can probably get in a standard way. This is just how much money, what year, and then plug it in. One of the things that I like about the way that we set this up is it's kind of modular. Right, we have a budget overview, we have a budget trends. We could envision putting in or dropping different sections. Use of force statistics is a great section to have. This is one in which, even between San Francisco and Oakland, we have different data sets that we're working with. I think this is where like each city probably has to see what data is available there, figure out how they want to tell this little modular piece, and then we create the charts, we create the text and put it in. I think there are projects out there who are working to build kind of cross-city data sets that, regarding especially use of force. And if we plug into some of those projects that are kind of aggregating these data sets across geographical areas, well, then that could be a section that just pulls the same type of data for each place. I guess long way of saying, in short, the budget data is probably the only one that's going to be really standard. The rest of it has to kind of figure out or massage a bit.
So there's another question from Jennifer. Have you considered a toggle to put the trends in current dollars, correct for inflation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. That's certainly an option. I think one thing that we did think about was whether or how we could compare, maybe not the inflation, but like cost of living. San Francisco in particular has, like, over the last 20 years, the cost of living there has, skyrocketed. And so much of this rise in police department spending comes from a rise in police salaries. And those salaries, a question which I don't think we really answered here was like, to what extent have those salaries just been keeping pace with rises in cost of living? That is an important part of knowing why budgets increase, but I don't think we've tackled it here.
Okay, so we'll have more time for more questions later. If anyone has one last quick question that they would like to ask now, please go ahead. And if not, we'll move to the next talk. Okay, so thank you so much, Dan. That was really cool and interesting. I am going to let Will and Elizabeth take the stage now.
Hi. Oh. Ooh. All right.
Hey, everyone.
Hi. So thanks for joining. I'm Will, Brigade Captain, and this is Elizabeth, also from Open Cleveland. And we're going to present on Refund Cleveland. And so how it started was actually Elizabeth and Austin, who couldn't join us tonight, presented at one of our meetings at the end of September. And do you want to like give a real quick like background of like the goal or context of this?
Sure. So this initiative was kind of been on the back burner for a while. And when, we had all of the, all of the protests and kind of calls for reconsideration of budgetary priorities that came with, the BLM protests last summer, it came back to the forefront. So this has been something, Will mentioned Austin, this has been something that Austin has been, kind of privately nurturing for a while. He reached out to our local BLM chapter, who got us in touch because I had been signed up through them. And then together we approached Will to kind of discuss what made sense from like a technology and community standpoint of how do we pull this together and, kind of teach people about the budget process in Cleveland, because Cleveland has a very opaque and closed door process for making the city budget and passing the city budget. And then also, like, how do we give people the ability to provide feedback in a process that doesn't really have a feedback loop? There's really not any public city council meetings. There's really not any town halls or anything where, you know, the mayor and city council ask for feedback from the general public about, you know, what they're doing with the budget. So that's kind of where it came from, how it came to be. And then, you know, Will has really helped us kind of breathe life into it.
Yeah. So yeah, for context, our budget is, the city of Cleveland's budget is on a annual basis, but it is first proposed at the beginning of March. And as Liz mentioned, you know, back in the fall, we knew that this upcoming city budget would be released by the mayor in early fall, or excuse me, not in early fall, in early March. And even though we have city council meetings on a weekly basis, there's no opportunity for the public to comment at such meetings. So through our website, you know, refundcleveland.com, which I'm going to walk through in just a moment, we will provide the opportunity to show, okay, here's what our current spending is, and also give the opportunity for someone to prioritize of what they would like their spending to be. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of what the website looks like. Make sure I'm on the right window. There we go. As we built this in the fall, we had taken last year's budget and sort of created different categories. And these categories, you know, police and corrections, emergency services, infrastructure, and housing, et cetera, were ones that we sort of just like iterated over time for clarity purposes, and sort of calculated from what was available in the budget and sort of not reallocated it, or I guess reallocated it, so to speak, but it was still reflective of like what was actually spent. And if you notice there were like really popular things like schools and the library, this is just for the general fund. Schools and the libraries, roads, and maybe a couple other things I'm forgetting, are funded a little bit differently in Cleveland and have their own dedicated funds that can only be used on that. So as you can see, these are the things that come from, you know, the general fund. So then once the budget was released right at the beginning of March, we spent time filling in to make these numbers actually reflect a little bit of, or to reflect the what the mayor had proposed, and then give the opportunity to say, okay, how would you like to allocate all of these funds? And you can see below, that is what the mayor actually has proposes in his budget. This was built here using a combination of Django and these interactions where you can move up and down were done through D3. So here's just a like a sample. I still have 18% to go. So, and you can open details that explain a little bit more of what are covered in those areas. And in retrospect, you know, we would have liked to provide like additional context if someone wanted to click and learn all about the particular like Department of Public Safety, or in our case, within the city of Cleveland's budget, there is a part-time boxing and wrestling commissioner, for So you could submit your budget, and then here we wanted to directly provide that second feedback loop that Liz had mentioned of given, or excuse me, lowering the barrier for a resident to contact their local council person, which there's 17 within the city of Cleveland. None are at large. They're all geographically based. And if a person doesn't know like their particular council person, using a geocoder from Google, we put in an address. So for example, I'm just going to put one in, and it'll fill in automatically like what ward that you belong to, and an email address. And not everyone has an email address, but this is something that we were sort of like thinking about before, because we wanted to store as little information as possible. We didn't want to like store people's personal addresses at all. So we sort of compromised and just also used the an email address. And the email address is also useful because you'll get your results back of what you submitted once you submit your budget. So you can view your budget submission now, and then be able to share it like on social media using either like Twitter or Facebook. And then also below, we say, okay, here's your council person, and give them a sort of like a templated letter of what they should, or of what they could include in like a email or letter to their council person. And sort of, and as you can see, that's sort of like a reference with like a unique URL, so you could like share your budget like on Facebook, whatever social media platform. So we submitted, I guess like sort of publicized it probably right when the mayor's public budget was released. So the budget would be passed by city council like 4 weeks later. And probably in retrospect, one of the better things that we probably could have done is probably done much closer outreach to like local activist organizations, sort of like as we built it. Like we had showed it off, I believe, like once or twice. But during that process of building it from like, the early fall to, late February, we probably could have had a lot more like participatory, like iterative process, and also focus much earlier on like sharing and spreading the word, about it. And ideally, in a non-pandemic world, we would have liked to get a lot more outreach, like in person as well. So those who may not directly, obviously, have a computer, which is like 25% of like the Cleveland City population, that they would be able to complete this. So sort of like what the results that we had from this were about 150 submissions. And we did get a feature written up like in our local alt weekly, the Cleveland Scene, which was like a nice, win for us. And that is, I believe, sort of about it. Oh, and I should mention that the code is available on GitHub, github.com/opencleveland/refund Cleveland. And I guess real quick too is like a technical background. We, as I mentioned, did Django to build the website, D3 to do the visualizations. Postgres uses the results for each of those budgetary submissions are done into a Postgres database, and then we use Mailgun to send out the emails, and Heroku to host it. do you have anything else you'd like to add, Liz? This was probably built, I should say, probably by a team of probably about 6 to 7 of us. And, all but 2 were new to Open Cleveland, which was really exciting.
I have nothing to add. Well, I think you did a great job kind of showcasing the site and, explaining kind of what we were going for and what we achieved. So. And
I should also mention too, there weren't any, there were some, definitely takeaways too that we'd like to do, like accessibility improvements and allow people to view other, like the budget in general, of like what other people had submitted. And also, regretfully, we wanted to provide like an email like at the end to the council people that said, hey, 24 people in your ward, Councilman Polensik, had submitted this budget, and this is what they think. And if you want to contact them, here's actually their emails, so let them know what you think. And what ended up happening was that the city budget usually passes within a month. They passed it like a week or so early, and I think also on us, like we could have emailed them like right in the beginning of like when we launched the project to tell them about it, and we didn't do that. But on the whole, I think we're of course proud of that that we did it, and we've actually met. I should say but Austin has met with, I believe, like a local advocacy group in Detroit, and I believe like one other city as well to adopt this.
Yep, and also we're planning and working through a way to use the site to also do a form of participatory budgeting with the American Rescue Plan funds that are going to be released soon. So that's also exciting. Mm-hmm. Lots of growth and future plans for this. So we're pretty excited. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have a comment from Dan. The pre-composed email function is great, making it easy to contact representatives. Anyone want to hop in with questions to either Will or Liz? You can either raise your hand, put it in the chat, or just start speaking. Okay, no questions. I was just I could really relate to how sometimes you're anything to do with outreach and communicating what you're doing. It takes so much work and time, and like what you were talking about, how maybe if we spoke to them more, then it's such a big part of anything you build. It's amazing. So there are going to be more budgets, right? So yeah, so
definitely
this is really really exciting. So thank you very much, and if we'll have more time, I think, for questions later. So
great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to move to our next talk. Ryan and Kelsey.
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm the brigade captain for Cogent for New Orleans, and we're going to talk to you about the Big Easy budget game tonight. And with me, I have Kelsey Foster, who is the real brain behind all of this and the power behind all of this. So I'm going to hand it off to her first to kind of give you a sense of a little bit of a history of the project and the goals of the project and how it works and what impact it's had so far. And then we'll come back to me and I'll give you a little bit of like the more technical, like what has Code for New Orleans done on this thing. Yeah, so let me hand it off to Kelsey first.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Very exciting to hear about all this good stuff going on in Cleveland. I had the chance to come up for the Sunlight Foundation Transparency Camp many years ago, so maybe some familiar faces. I, for many years, worked for a nonprofit organization called the Committee for a Better New Orleans, where I led their public finance campaign. I'm now on the board of directors for that organization, moved along a couple years ago, but still care very, very much about this project, and I'm excited to tell you all about it. So we started this project in the years after Hurricane Katrina, because as you can imagine, there were kind of millions and billions of dollars in the headlines in the newspapers every day from FEMA, from HUD, of recovery money that was coming into town. But most New Orleanians don't have a bank account. They don't have a checking account. They're cash basis. At the time, about a third of our city was cash basis only, unbanked or underbanked. And so to have these really complex conversations about public finance, and especially in recovery mode, right, when there's so many major decisions being made, was really hard. We also live in a city and in a state with a very long history of distrusting government that is, quite frankly, pretty well earned. And so we wanted to, as kind of the our nonprofit really focuses on civic engagement, government engagement with government, good government, transparency, and local democracy. So we saw an opportunity to kind of engage people in the recovery process through helping them to understand how all of this was working. The year we launched our game was actually also the year our former mayor was indicted on 26 charges of embezzlement and corruption. So it came at a really good time for us. Those feelings that people have just naturally as New Orleanians, that you can't trust government, you can't trust money, they had extra sharp teeth at that time. So we were really excited to kind of try to find a way to get people a little bit more hands-on. Our first year, we actually, we're a nonprofit, so we approached this from a very low-tech perspective, and had kind of a community convening where we had people come in and we gave everybody a cup of red beans, and each bean was worth $1 million, and they could go around the room and spend their beans on parks or libraries or police or all of these different things. It was really fun. We had a huge turnout from new people who, our Latino population increased 5 times after Katrina, with people who came to help us rebuild. So we had New Orleanians, we had people who'd been there for generations and just moved home. But of course, then we had to count like 600 pounds of red beans plus. It was a nightmare. So analog is great, and it was really, really fun, but we kind of made the jump online the next year. I believe it was in 2006 when we launched, 2016 when we launched. We did work with a private developer here in Southeast Louisiana to build the site. They were really wonderful. We loved them. We were able to get some grant funding through a pitch competition, which was pretty fun too. So I want to show y'all a little bit of the site. I also just want to say I loved the kind of email function of the Refund Cleveland site. One thing we do struggle with a little bit is our kind of login. We specifically asked people to create an account to get into the site because we knew government was not going to be incredibly excited about having a lot more input into their budget. We wanted to be able to kind of say, this was one control on our data. This is one way that we were ensuring that it was relatively clean, that people aren't going in and playing 20 times and skewing data, which you actually can do. It'll just overwrite your budget each time. So we have an English and a Spanish version. We'll take a look at English. We have both video and written instructions because some people are video people and some people are reading people. And then this is what our site looks like. We don't have one built out for 2021 just yet. So usually there's a little bit more pictures, graphics that go along with it. But we show people kind of what our total budget is. In 2019, it was a $702 million. This is just discretionary local funds. So anything that is FEMA, federal, state, restricted funding doesn't show up here. And that's kind of one of the things we're learning about as we're, playing the game with folks. So each department looks like this. Normally there's a nice picture here. We show you what the department received last year, what our relatively arbitrary minimum is, because we know from our red bean game that people will give exactly $0 to the prison and the police. And while that is a legitimate social statement, it is not incredibly helpful when it comes to kind of the realities of budgeting, especially here in New Orleans, where our police and prison are both under federal consent decree, and that funding is mandatory, and that hurts. It sucks a lot of our money away from us, and it's something we want. It's part of that civic education that we want people to have through the site. And then we also show them the other funds, which are those federal and state sources that are already dedicated. So folks can add, they can take away. There's a short blurb explaining what the department does. Learn More tells folks a little bit about what might happen if you give more money, what might happen if you take money away. And then some departments also have a quick poll that we ask more qualitative questions that aren't just numbers in a spreadsheet at the end. So as folks go through, they're able to kind of build their budget, tell us what it is that their priorities are, right? Where would you put this money if you were a resident? We take that data and report on it to the mayor and city council. We hope and they like to think they use that to create a more responsive budget. I will say our current city council is really, really engaged and supportive with this. So we're very grateful to kind of be in a good partnership place with that. We do really heavy outreach because we do have a nonprofit that runs this. They have a paid staff. They're really good at engagement. We have partnerships with people like the Council on Aging. When you finish your budget, it kicks you out to a third-party demographic survey, which is great. We're able to kind of get your age, race, zip code, all that good stuff, ask some more qualitative questions. And we keep a close eye on that data throughout the year to see who's playing and who's not playing. Where do we need to hear from more people? Is it seniors? Is it the Spanish-speaking community? Maybe it's people in a certain zip code. So we want to make sure that our data mirrors our people. That's really important to us. And we get pretty close every year. Our average engagement is usually around 500 residents. And we ran from 2016 to 2019 with pretty regular budget games going. And then unfortunately, funding was no longer available and we kind of went quiet for a little bit. And that's probably a good time to turn it over to you, Ryan, to talk about how y'all have been engaged.
Yeah, so we started helping out with some of the rollout events and things back in. We started talking about it in 2018, and then we actually helped organize some of the stuff in 2019. And then we were pretty sad to see that it got shuttered for 2020 because of funding. And so my co-lead and I, Mark, and I were trying to figure out how we could go about helping. We talked to Kelsey a number of times about it. And finally, we said, well, look, we'll try to, find donated infrastructure and that kind of stuff and stand this back up for you and get it running at least in a sort of a minimal cost way until we can find other funding to really support running it again. And so that's kind of what we took on. It's been a while and a good bit of work. We did find a donated data center machine that it's running on now. We donated our DNS just to kind of get it up and running. We're hoping to move it over to the Committee for a Better New Orleans DNS very soon, as soon as it's ready. There's still 4 or 5 bugs that we need to fix. It's inherited app, so we didn't really have a lot of choice over the tech stack, but it runs on PHP Laravel and sitting on top of MongoDB. And so that's kind of an unfamiliar tech stack for us. And so we kind of had to learn as we were going in getting this up and running. But the good news is it is now running on the server. There are a few more bugs to fix, which I'm working on now. And we're really hoping to have this like up and ready for real rollout by May 1st. And so I think, at that point, maybe this is a good time. Also, we have put the code out on GitHub. So if there's something you're interested in looking at, you can definitely look at GitHub /code for NOLA, and then you'll find public budget game there. And I think I'll turn it over to Kelsey again to give a sense of like, what are the rollout plans for next month and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we one of the reasons I asked my like data formatting and availability question earlier is because the city of New Orleans budget data, and actually almost, well, we've gotten a lot better. We've come a long way. All of our budget data and all of our finance data is not machine readable. It is literally an 800-page PDF that lives online. And when we started the site, part of the reason we were excited to kind of like, this was like fairly like novel for a lot of people who lived here their entire lives and were really engaged, had never seen our budget, because until post-Katrina, the only ways to see the budget was to physically go down to City Hall and they would hand you that 800-page, not PDF, but book. And so we're still, that's kind of one of the policy points we've been really pushing on, is like, look at all the beautiful things we can build when data is functional, because PDFs aren't functional, especially when you have a population who can't read spreadsheets, right? Like, part of the beauty of this site is that we stopped going to neighborhood association meetings and showing them an Excel spreadsheet that they can't read. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating for residents. I think it's, nobody likes to be shown something that they don't understand. The game is something, one thing I really like about this is that you're given a task. There's a submit button. We call it a game, which is a total lie. You don't win anything and no one loses, but it's a lot less scary than, any other kind of like finance words we could put in there. So for next month, we are hoping to manually enter our budget data because that is how we have to do this until something changes. We'll put our pretty pictures back in, and then we roll this out with a huge network of partners and the city council. So that means a lot. Our first probably 100 to 150 players when we launch happen immediately. They're engaged people, and they tend to be younger, whiter, and more college educated than the average New Orleanian. So the rest of that year is kind of spent making sure that we're going to, we literally go to grocery stores, and our first launch in partnership with Code for New Orleans was actually at a bar, which was really fun. We had happy hour with the city councilman in that district. We also host budget game. We call them budget game nights or budget game, days at senior centers, libraries, particularly if we can get a council person present. Those are our most successful events, because then they are able to be present while 20, 30 of their constituents are playing this game and asking questions and learning, instead of just yelling at them in front of a microphone at City Hall for 2 minutes about their potholes, which is really the only engagement that they've ever had. We don't have any kind of formal participation structure here. So civic engagement for us is 2 minutes in front of our microphone at City Hall, and that sucks for everyone. So this is a much more conversational way to engage people. I think our council people they leave events really shocked the first couple times at like how conversational and constructive the event tends to be. It's not like somebody yelling about the hotel motel tax of 1989 or some weird, like tinfoil hat situation. So with COVID, obviously our in-person game nights are going to change a little bit. Our hope is, and we're fundraising right now around being able to go pop up in parks we have some beautiful outdoor space here, and also hiring musicians to come and play. We're a music city, so we're really hoping we can make sure people are drawn to us and have something to do while they're playing. We also partner with schools, classrooms, university, Tulane University, Loyola University, usually macroeconomics classes, poli-sci, stuff like that. And it's a really fun when we're playing. So I would say about 2/3 of our players play with us at an event. A third of them just go find it online and they go and they do their thing. The other 2/3 are somebody we're touching in some sort of an event situation, either in a classroom or a senior center. And those are really good opportunity to have a conversation about our city. So people play and then we talk about it. What surprised you? What didn't surprise you? How did you spend your money, or how did you not spend your money? And then they ask me all the questions that they've had like brewing for 100 years of life in the city. So we're really excited to get things back up and running. Working with Code for New Orleans has been like this blessing that we just couldn't have even asked for a better partnership. So we're really excited to be getting back on our feet.
Yeah, and I'll finish up with, Mark and I still are not great at PHP. So if you are a PHP Laravel expert, we want your help. Let us know.
Thank you very much. This is awesome. Making things playful. Yeah, we need more of that. Any questions from anyone here?
I have a question.
Yes.
Great presentation, a great job with this product. I'm curious, so after in gathering, kind of having all of these games taking place and kind of gathering all this data, have you been able to, I don't know if you mentioned this already, apologies if you did, but is there like a visual dashboard or report that's able to be generated of what you're seeing, what you're seeing?
So there is on it like our internal administrative backend, which is great for us, but it's not public facing. We do reports throughout the year. We do a midterm report in the summer and then an end of year report when the regular city budget is announced. That is very, very graphic because we write a full report, but we also know nobody reads it because it's like 20 some pages long. So we make some really, really nice infographics, and our results are not surprising. People want less reactive public safety and more investment in mental health care. And, we get to have a lot of really tough, interesting talks with people about systems and what is and isn't funded. So I think those are really helpful. That tends to be kind of our marketing, is getting those graphs out, and people see those and want to know more and click and engage. But unfortunately, right now, there is not any kind of like a easily auto-generated kind of graph of results.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you again for both of you. That was awesome. And we are going to move to our last presenter, Veronica.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been great to watch these presentations. So thanks so much to everyone who's presented. I have less of a presentation and more just kind of wanted to discuss some of the uses of kind of open data projects and how they apply to the priority action area constructs that we have, that we've employed and delved into as a network over the last couple of years. So to give a little bit of context on what priority action areas are, we had gotten a lot of feedback as the network team and National Advisory Council about how do we kind of coalesce our efforts into areas that are areas that folks are excited about and have energy in, and may not necessarily be connecting with each other about the work that they're doing, or there's areas where there may need to be more resources provided, or are there intersections with other organizations or within the Code for America programs teams to work on some of these areas. So we went into a large kind of process to figure out what areas were folks most excited about and how could we provide some resources in those areas. So in 2020 was the first year that we kind of started in this priority action area concept, and focused on 4 priority action areas, which were in rapid response, creating pathways for record clearance, voting rights, as well as court notifications. And so those were the 4 kind of areas that we decided we wanted to put a lot of our focus. And so as the rapid response priority action area really came into development through COVID-19, one of the questions that came up as the rise in the racial justice movement, or at least the awareness among a lot of the country became greater, was how do we kind of make an impact as a network? And this was a tricky conversation because we know kind of where our skills are, and we also want to make sure that we're supporting the work of organizations that have been doing this for centuries, and make sure that we, actually play to our strengths rather than trying to delve into areas that aren't really our strong points. And so through that, we decided to add a set of project canvases around how could we be impactful in this area. And I'm going to share my screen here. Are you able to give me permission to share my screen? Thanks.
You should be good now.
Okay, so here were some of the projects that were focused on the what we called local transparency, accountability, and the right fight for racial justice. So we realized that one of our strong points was being able to look at data and transparency, and being able to look into how kind of our local government and systems are working. And some of that had overlap with budget. So what were our budgets looking like in terms of how much money was going towards different services, in particular policing, that obviously has a big effect on the disparities in racial justice, and obviously the tragic events that continue to happen, and the murder of thousands of people across the country. And so Open Budget Oakland was actually a project that became really highly searched in Oakland last summer, so that folks that were working in advocacy organizations could see how the budget was being allocated and where were there areas of possible overspending to be able to be reallocated towards more effective ways of working with the community to make sure that we weren't overspending in our policing areas. And so through that work, and through a lot of the interest in brigades, and what it was that people were interested in focusing in, when we went back to the table this last year to talk about what new priority action areas do we want to add in 2021, one of the areas that came up was policing, and how we could make an effect in the area of policing. So we went through an entire process again to talk about what area we wanted to add to our priority action areas in 2021. and policing ended up being the area that was chosen. We did a bunch of surveying of folks within the network, of asking folks what were they interested in, and then people voted on what they were interested in. And then from there, the National Advisory Council took some of the most voted upon suggestions by brigade leaders and by brigade members, and were able to use that information to choose the 2021 priority action area. And so with the presentations tonight, we've seen a lot of how are we looking at our budgets, and then how can we help community organizations use the information that we're able to help uncover, and how do we help reimagine what our budget system looks like. And so that fits into some of the work that we can possibly really lift up an engagement as a network in 2021 through the policing priority action area. So some of the other ways that we can contribute in a network in this area are auditing our local police budgets to help community groups identify areas of overspending, which is a topic that kind of came up tonight when we were when the presentations were talking about what people were doing when they reimagined what a local budget looked like, and then making local budget processes and documents more accessible and available to the public, helping local advocates strengthen their call for distributing funds to areas such as social services, education, community enrichment programs, etc. Working with local governments to help implement accountability measures. So a lot of times when there are standards that are in place that are called for by frontline community organizations, and those changes and policies get enacted, local departments need help being able to update their technology and systems to be able to actually abide by the new measures. And so how do we possibly look to help departments and folks do that, and then help with efforts to decriminalize, decarcerate, and reinvest in our communities. And thinking about this a little bit more broadly, so what are kind of the different areas that intersect or influence or are a big part of what our policing system links to? So that's looking at fines and fees, or possibly our 911 system, and how can we affect change in those areas as well. So anyways, just wanted to use this opportunity to highlight the fact that these budgeting projects are amazing products within themselves, and also have possible uses, these projects or similar projects, in some of our priority action area work through the ways that I just walked through and mentioned, and would welcome any questions about that.
Questions? Anyone?
I think this is really far out there, Veronica. But I'll just say it. I'm curious about, I think that what I'm finding fascinating about the themes of kind of having open budgeting, and I think I love where you're taking the conversation, like, how do we envision being able to continue that civic engagement for folks who are wanting to feel that level of trust, and also maybe feel that level of empowerment. And this might be like very far into the future, but I do know that there's conversations around within this administration and among other kind of like government-centered tech folks around how we can start introducing more blockchain into these kind of various aspects of kind of decentralizing information and being able to see exactly where things are and where they're going next, potentially. And I'm curious if that has ever been something that has been in the whispers, or on a weird parking lot somewhere when you're talking to people, or like on some sort of like maybe in the background or a conversation. But that may be kind of far out there, but I know that's something that in my research I'm seeing that more governments are interested in blockchain technology as it's being adopted by a lot of companies. and their ability to kind of showcase where things are.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I would say that I have not encountered those conversations. However, I am very far removed from a lot of technical aspects of things, and so I don't know if I would be the right person to kind of ask about that. I'm curious if anybody in the group is familiar with these conversations.
I've had a few conversations with some folks at our city hall about blockchain, and usually they're somewhat confusing conversations. I think maybe blockchain is not generally understood enough as a technology by a lot of folks in the government space, and particularly at the local government setting. And I think, like any technology, it's a tool. And so if it's the right tool for the job you're trying to do, then it's a very good thing. And if it's not the right tool for the job you're trying to do, then it actually creates a bunch of complication that you don't need. And so I think, like, trying to help city government technologists parse that out actually takes a fairly large amount of work to do. And that's maybe why it's not moving as fast as it could. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely promise for that technology for certain things. I haven't seen it move quickly, at least in our local government. And I think those are kind of the reasons.
Thank you. And Will's audio is having issues, and he just wanted to echo those concerns by Ryan. Felicia, did you have your hand raised earlier? Did you have a question?
No, not anymore. I'm okay, thanks.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I had, thanks Veronica for presenting and laying that all out. I think certainly kind of touching on some of the things other people have mentioned, so much of, so much is opened up by having the data, and certainly like the Police Trends project, for San Francisco and Oakland has definitely been empowered by having these open data portals from both of those cities. And there's, there's a big difference between a city publishing data in a PDF versus in a CSV file or spreadsheet. And maybe, and again, like for policing projects, there's so much power that comes from this context of comparing either across time or across cities. It's a police takes up this percentage in this city, this percentage in this city. And so I think maybe one of the approaches could be to kind of like try to construct some sort of like data standard for certain kinds of reporting, for certain kinds of, I mean, I am still very new to budgetary processes, budgetary information, but essentially if there's a data standard that you can construct that would then allow you go to a city and say, hey, can we get the data in this format with these fields, these columns, that kind of thing. And then with that, if cities, if you get the same kind of data in the same kind of format, then you can kind of plug and play in various tools. Like you don't have to rebuild the same thing across many different cities.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, go ahead, Veronica.
No, I just love that angle. And I think this is why it's so great to have these conversations as we kind of, start thinking about what are the areas that we can have impact in a space. And I think that's kind of exactly where we can think about of how do we, with our particular knowledge set and skills, make an impact in this space of like, you know, we know as technologists, you know, what is needed for us to be able to actually even assess the data like in a very usable level. And so making those kind of data standards, and that intersects with some of our work around like what is it that we are asking of local government to be able to have as standards for whether it's data or technology. Within Code for America, there's the idea of delivery driven government. Some of you may be familiar with or remember from past summits or other workshops. And so kind of what is it that we are expecting in the 21st century to be able to, you know, have you know, even basic conversations around how is it that we're allocating our resources. So I also like the fact that with our priority action areas, one of the things we think about as well is like, how can we make an impact just using our voices? We have so much power in our numbers. And so being able to advocate for something pretty clear cut is also useful. So thanks for bringing that up.
So we have 4 minutes left, and I wanted to see if anyone had questions that they wanted to ask any of the panelists from the talk before, or just comments or anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up.
So I'm just going to speak to Will's comments in the chat. There's an initiative in Ohio to share budget data consistently. But the issue, as it's recalled, is getting municipalities to adopt it because they don't see the value of changing their processes.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, and I think I'll echo that for New Orleans. Like, we've had similar conversations with New Orleans folks, and frankly, the budget system they're using to track this data is so old and archaic that like making any changes to it is kind of a difficult proposition for anyone. And so it produces the PDFs, and the PDFs are what we get.
I wonder if the approach then is to try to create, like, I don't know all of the pain points of city governments, but if there's a tool that could then, like, you have to have your data in a certain way, but when you enter that, you get all of these, like, here's a good dashboard visualization, you know, connecting to certain resources or funding. Like, I'm not sure what that looks like, but the prerequisite is to have it in a certain format.
We just in New Orleans, we just onboarded over the last 2 years an ERP system, an enterprise reporting system, because we literally were using like Excel to run our city, which is great, but you know, it wasn't working, right? Like, departments weren't able to talk to each other, people didn't have access. It was a nightmare. So part of our policy push that we've been making is one, to try to find some sort of a standardized format to adopt, but two, for comparison purposes to other cities. But two, you have this software now. Maybe you had that excuse for the last 300 years, but you don't have it anymore. Like, you are using a system now that should be able to do this. We also use Socrata for other things. So we have relationships with major civ tech companies. We're just not doing the outward facing stuff.
Yeah, so there's hope, but it's not there at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot to catch up for government, and you know, it's moving so fast and they're so behind, and it's just it's a tricky one for sure. Yeah, so I unless we have any other last comments or questions, and yeah, so just everyone's excited about this discussion. I agree, and if people do want to continue discussing, you're you're welcome to, but we are at time, so anyone that does need to drop off can. Yeah, this is very interesting. Yes, thank you, Ryan. Thanks all of the panelists for sharing with us all this great information and projects.
Yep, and I just wanted to make a plug. We probably won't be getting a ton of work spread up in the policing priority action area in the very near future, but there is a Slack channel, policing-PAA, or is it PA? Yeah, policing-PAA, where you can continue these conversations if you're interested.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a good night.